Hello students, today we will be talking of the next module. The module title is Theory of Games and Strategic Behavior Part 2. This module will focus on the practical application of game theory in terms of examples like prisoner's dilemma as well as the types of strategies adopted under game theory like the maximin, the minimax and the maximax strategies. And finally, we discuss the concept of Nash equilibrium. So, at the very outset, we first start with the introduction to the prisoner's dilemma. A common misconception is that all participants in a game must be hyper-rational in order for game theory to be applied. There are, however, no such assertions in the theory. Players can be helpful and sympathetic as well as mean or jealous. Not only would other participants have different incentives, but they might also possess different knowledge. The player must constantly consider the other players as they are, not as he himself is, while figuring out an equilibrium or predicting how they will react to any player's action. In the field of social science, the most renowned game of strategy is the prisoner's dilemma. It aids in developing an understanding of the principles that control the extent of collaboration and competition in social, political and commercial environments. The standard prisoner's dilemma is constructed such that each player chooses to defend himself at the expense of the other. Consequently, both parties land themselves in a worse situation than they would if they cooperated among themselves in the decision-making process. In contemporary analysis, the prisoner's dilemma is one of the most popularly used examples to explain the application of game theory. In the prisoner's dilemma, two people have been distanced from each other and are not allowed to reconnect, and they have to decide whether or not to cooperate. When both sides decide to collaborate and respond as a team, they benefit the most. This is how the traditional prisoner's dilemma works. Karan and Arjun, two thieves, have been taken into custody and have to undergo an investigation in different rooms. Since there are no more witnesses, the authorities can only successfully prosecute them if they can persuade at least one of the thieves to cheat on the other partner and provide a statement about the crime. Every thief must decide whether to stay quiet and collaborate with their associate or to break the partnership and provide testimony to the police. The police will only be able to convict them on a lesser charge if they both work in cooperation and keep silent. This kind of a collaborated behavior would result in 1 year in jail for each of them. That means 1 year for Karan and 1 year for Arjun. If one person makes an admission of the crime and the other does not, the person who confesses will be released, while the other who will have to serve 5 years in jail. However, if they both confess to having committed the theft, each will serve 3 years in prison for being an associate of their partner in theft if they speak against each other, which means 3 years for imprisonment for Karan and 3 years for Arjun. This manner of tabulating the options exercised by each player or offender in this case is called a payoff matrix, in which the responses are recorded as rows and columns. In a matrix, the row player selects a row and the column player selects a column at the same time. The result of the game is two payoffs. The row player's payoff is the first entry and the column player's reward is the second one. Now this payoff matrix is explained in the following manner. Let's say that Karan confesses and Arjun confesses as well. In that case, both get 1 year of jail each. If Arjun confesses but Karan denies, then Arjun will get 5 years of jail and Karan will get no jail at all. If Arjun denies and Karan confesses, he will not be imprisoned, but Karan will be imprisoned for 5 years. But if Karan denies and Arjun denies as well, both of them will be imprisoned for 3 years. That means there will be a term of 3 years for jail to both of them. Now, let's discuss the possible outcomes in the case of the prisoner's dilemma. In this instance, regardless of the decision the other thief makes, each thief always has an incentive to turn a traitor towards the other. Karan believes that if Arjun does not say anything, he will have the option to either cooperate with Arjun and serve 1 year in prison, or he will be allowed to go free. In this instance, it becomes apparent that he would be better off betraying Arjun. However, Arjun will have to decide between serving 5 years in imprisonment for remaining silent and serving 3 years for testifying against Karan for cheating on him. It again seems obvious that he would rather choose to undergo the 3 years of imprisonment by confessing rather than serving 5 years of jail by not admitting at all, because he would know that Karan in all likelihood would have saved himself and denied having committed the crime. In either scenario, Karan will benefit more from refusing to admit and testifying against Arjun than if he works in cooperation with Arjun. In any case, Arjun will always be better off defecting as well, as he has the same set of options available as Karan. The prisoner's dilemma arrives at a paradoxical situation, which is explained again further as follows. The two theft perpetrators can reduce the total amount of time they will spend behind the bars by cooperating and remaining silent or admitting the crime, which will only result in 1 year of jail for each and 2 years of imprisonment in total for both. In this case, admission of the offence becomes the dominant strategy. Nevertheless, the individual incentives that they encounter will always cause them to defect, resulting in the maximum 6-year total amount of time they will spend behind bars, with each of them denying and ending up in a 3-year term separately. The question that arises here is whether there is a solution to the problem of the prisoner's dilemma or not, and the answer to this question can be explained in this way. Both players have the option to reward or penalize the other for their individual behavior if the game is played again without an obvious outcome. A win-win situation might result for both the players if neither of them confesses to the crime and both have to serve only 1 year in jail. Now let us discuss the real-life illustrations of the prisoner's dilemma. The concept of the prisoner's dilemma can find application in the fields of economics and business. A real-world illustration would be the cooperation of two rival businesses in order to increase their combined profit. This can be illustrated using the example of two soft drink companies, Pepsi and Coca-Cola. The main objective of each company is to prepare a price plan for its product. When both charge a higher price, they are able to make maximum advantage of their combined market strength. Assuming that every month each of them generates a profit of rupees 10 lakhs, setting up competitively cheap pricing enables one of them to attract a lot of business from its competitor. Now we assume here that Coca-Cola makes rupees 12 lakhs in profit by fixing its price margin lower, whereas Pepsi is able to make just rupees 7 lakhs. It can also be assumed that each would make rupees 9 lakhs in profit if they both established prices at a lower level. Here, admitting crime is comparable to the low price plan, while remaining silent is comparable to the high price option. The latter can be referred to as collaboration and the former as cheating. Then each firm's dominant strategy is cheating, although when both cheat, the outcome is worse for each than what they experience when they both cooperate. Apparently, the prisoner's dilemma seems to contradict Adam Smith's concept of the invisible hand. Each player in the game fails to promote the group's interests when he pursues his own selfish interests. However, working in tandem in a group is not always beneficial to the society as a whole. For example, a cooperative approach to maintaining high pricing is not always in the best interest of the society, as it usually results in higher costs for the buyers, much more than the profit that it fetches for the participating companies. Thus, businesses that cheat on collusive agreements in order to further their own self-interest frequently benefit the society as a whole. In a similar manner, a mutually cooperative attitude of the perpetrators when caught and interrogated by the police might render the process difficult for the police and may even reduce the chances of the offenders being convicted. That is why, before attempting to advance or thwart collaboration in the name of greater personal policy goals, one must comprehend the plausible outcomes and decipher how a cooperative strategy works. The prisoner's dilemma, an exemplary instance of game theory, was conceptualized in 1950 during the Cold War by mathematicians named Merrill Flood and Melvin Drescher of Rand Corporation, although the game theorist Alvin Tucker subsequently gave it the name. There are conjectures that the prisoner's dilemma was designed primarily to initiate effective deliberations between the United States and the Soviet Union in the era of the Cold War. The prisoner's dilemma is a classic illustration of how different people's strategic approaches can result in less than ideal outcomes for both the parties. Now we move on to discuss the types of strategies involved in game theory. The participants in the game theory have a choice among multiple primary methods to play the game. Generally speaking, each participant must choose the amount of risk they are willing to accept and the extent to which they will go in order to obtain the most favorable outcome. Now, we first discuss the dominant strategy. While using a dominant strategy, a player acts in a way that maximizes the play's potential regardless of what the other players choose to do. In the business world, this might mean that an organization chooses to grow and enter a new market regardless of whether or not the rival has made the same decision. Like already mentioned in the prisoner's dilemma, confession or admission of crime by both the perpetrators would have been the dominant strategy. Next is the maximax strategy. In game theory, a maximax strategy is the one in which a player chooses a course of action that produces the best of the best outcomes, especially when he is faced with uncertainty. Every choice made by an individual has some costs and some benefits, and the maximax approach looks for the areas with the most potential gains. It is more frequently described as an aggressive or a positive approach. Then we talk about the maximin strategy. In the game theory, a maximin strategy leads to the player selecting the best possible outcome out of the all possible alternatives. The player decides firmly on avoiding the worst possible outcome by hedging risk and foregoing all his benefits. Businesses frequently encounter and embrace this strategy when contemplating filing a lawsuit against the rival. Companies usually tend to accept an undesirable outcome when they have to settle out of court rather than undergoing a public trial. If, however, the matter had gone to trial, its outcome would rather have been worse. The next one is the minimax strategy. In game theory and decision making, minimax is a type of backtracking algorithm that determines the best course of action for a player, provided that their opponent plays optimally as well. This strategy is usually deployed in two-player turn-based games like chess, tic-tac-toe, etc. The two participants in minimax strategy are referred to as maximizers and minimizers respectively, whereas the minimizer seeks to achieve the lowest possible score, the maximizer seeks to obtain the largest score that can be acquired in the game. The next one is the mixed strategy. Now, although a mixed strategy may appear to be a matter of chance, careful planning must be done while selecting which aspects or actions must be combined. To understand this better, we can think about the association between a pitcher and a hitter in baseball. It is imperative that the pitcher avoids throwing the same pitch repeatedly to prevent the hitter from guessing what will follow next. Rather, the pitcher needs to vary his technique from pitch to pitch in order to generate uncertainty, which it thinks will work to its advantage. Now we move on to discuss the bargaining strategy. In a bargaining strategy, two players share a pie. Both wish to reach a consensus on the method to divide the pie as early as possible, and each wants a bigger portion of it. The principle of looking forward and thinking back helps to obtain the equilibrium amount of share when the two alternatively make bids. An instant agreement might be achieved, however, the shares are subject to the cost of delay. The player who is more eager to come to a decision and behaves in a desperate manner receives a smaller portion. Now, revealing or concealing of information is another strategy that we talk of. When a player possesses information that others do not have access to, he may be reluctant to share it or may be willing to do it in a way that provides more credibility. For example, a company's dedication to excellence. The overarching idea in both the situations is that actions communicate more than mere words can do. In order to hide information from the competing rivals, the best strategy is to mix up all possible moves so that he is not able to exactly predict the opponent's strategy. For instance, bluffing in poker should not be done consistently. An extended warranty for a product, for instance, is a sufficient indicator to the customer that the company thinks that it is manufacturing a product of superior quality. Now we move further to discuss the Nash equilibrium. Nash equilibrium is one of the most significant concepts that are used in reference to the outcomes of a game theory. It was an American mathematician, John Nash, who established the theory and was awarded the Nobel Prize for his contribution to the study of game theory. If a player has knowledge of the strategies that can be adopted by another player, yet he does not alter his own choices, then the outcome is said to be in Nash equilibrium. Any game that has a set of solutions with the characteristic feature that no player can alter the outcomes by changing his strategy while the other players keep their strategies the same is said to have Nash equilibrium. These pairs of strategies and their corresponding outcomes indicate the Nash equilibrium. This concept is usually put to use in non-cooperative games. The Nash equilibrium is a tool used in economic theory to demonstrate how the phenomena of decision making, which is based on strategic interactions between different players, is influenced by the choices and behavior of other players. Economic behavior may be modeled using this concept to determine the optimal course of action in any given circumstance. For simultaneous move games, Nash's concept of equilibrium still does not provide a comprehensive solution to the issue of circular reasoning. While some games have none of these equilibria, that is the Nash equilibrium points, others have several possibilities for Nash equilibrium. Moreover, nothing has been explained about the dynamic process that might lead to a state of equilibrium. Nevertheless, despite these limitations, the theory has been found to be very beneficial in understanding various types of strategic interactions. To understand the point further, in the example of the two thieves as discussed under the prisoner's dilemma, confessing will be a Nash equilibrium for both Karan and Arjun, and because in any other outcome, when at least one of the offenders is not confessing, no outcome gives a better solution than when both of them confess. That is why only the outcome where both confess proves to be a Nash equilibrium. With the only exception of a tie, the theory of dominated strategies extends to Nash equilibrium. In other words, a strategy cannot be part of its Nash equilibrium if it is completely dominant. On the contrary, a strategy may be said to be a dominated strategy and continue to be a part of the Nash equilibrium if it involves a tied value. Now, to conclude my observations, game theory is one such concept that has its application in economics as well as in real life illustrations like the prisoner's dilemma. Prisoner's dilemma is one of the most popular concepts used in the social sciences and is most helpful in developing an understanding of the concepts and principles that govern the extent of collaboration and competition in social, political and commercial environments. In the conventional explanation of the prisoner's dilemma, every player is expected to choose a strategy to defend himself even at the cost of the other player. That is why, more often than not, both players might land up in a situation where the outcome for each of them is worse than what they would have experienced if they had cooperated with each other. In the case of the prisoner's dilemma, there is a paradoxical situation where instead of cooperating and arriving at a better outcome, both players choose to act more selfishly and rather end up in a worse situation than they could have expected. The concept of prisoner's dilemma finds a wonderful application, especially in the field of business economics, where the business entities that are in competition with one another opt for a decision that renders each of them to lose or gain less than what they would have achieved by cooperating with each other. Interestingly, the concept of prisoner's dilemma seems to be in contravention of Adam Smith's theory of invisible hand, because the choices made by an individual are not always socially desirable or acceptable. At such times, deviation from a cooperative behavior rather serves the interests of the society to a greater extent than the benefits acquired by catering to the selfish interests of the individuals. There are various strategies that can be used in the context of the game theory, such as the dominance strategy, whereby a player's choice can maximize the potential of the game. Then there are the maximax, the maximin and the minimax strategies, where the players choose the best possible outcomes from the available alternatives. The mix strategy, which requires planning in a manner to terminate the scope of the opponent being able to guess the outcome or bargaining, and the concealing of information strategy, where the players either reach a consensus on the outcomes or conceal information altogether so as to prevent the opponent from anticipating the rival's action. Finally, the Nash equilibrium concept explains that if, under a given set of strategies that are already known to a player, the other players do not intend to alter their chosen strategies, then the choices reflected by the individuals are considered to be in a state of Nash equilibrium. Since decision making in economic theory is largely influenced by the strategic choices exercised by individuals, the ideology propounded under Nash equilibrium has proven to be extremely beneficial in determining the most optimal course of action under any circumstances. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. Thank you so much.